that this is the only chance for me to cover a war in Israel because our other reporter, Hamid Mir, who's a very well-known name in Pakistani media, he was in Lebanon. I met young boys who have lost their limbs, and he was wearing a football shirt of Barcelona. And I said, he actually asked me, "Do you play football?" I said, "No, I watch football." I said, "Okay." And he said, "One day I'll be, a Messi for Gaza." The stories are so many, heartbreaking stories. If you're actually human, if you have a heart, if you have kids, only then you can relate to those. They treat all journalists, so badly. Whether you're American, British, Muslim, non-Muslim, they do not like journalists who are covering.
Hello and welcome to Warzone, a weekly show on Grey Beyond Narratives. It's a new segment that we're introducing on our YouTube channel. We explore the stories and issues that matters around the world of politics, media, and society. I'm your host with old hosts like Shaji, Furqan, and Sid. And today we have a guest with us, Mr. Aamir Ghauri, a veteran journalist, author, and analyst who has covered some of Pakistan's and the region's most important events and topics. Mr. Ghauri has worked as correspondent, editor, and bureau chief for various media outlets in Pakistan, the United Kingdom, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as authoring several books in Pakistan politics, history, and culture. He has also founded and directs a news intelligence unit, a media consultancy and research firm, and is a frequent commentator on international news networks. We will talk to Mr. Ghauri about his career, his views, and his projects in this interview, as well as ask him some questions that you, our viewers, have sent us. So stay tuned and don't miss this exclusive and insightful Warzone interview with Mr. Aamir Ghauri. But first, we will go to Shaji. Shaji, please take over.
Thank you very much. So we're going to basically just begin with a small introduction in regards to what is going to come in the upcoming weeks. As you know, we've covered the Palestine-Israel conflict for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Now we've got an opportunity with Mr. Aamir Ghauri, who's worked with the BBC and also set up various media outlets. And especially what we're counting on is the experience which he's had in regards to covering the Israel-Palestine war on behest of GeoTV and various other outlets. He's one of the first and only Pakistani journalist or of Pakistani origin, a journalist of Pakistani origin, to have basically been on ground. And so I think this can be very insightful, not this time around, but in previous occasions. So we're going to begin with that in terms of how that was and how he can relate that to what's going on right now. So the floor is all yours, Mr. Aamir Ghauri. Can you basically give us a brief background how you ended up being on ground in that specific region, and what was your experience like in regards to that, and how the Pakistani media outlets basically went out and supported you, and what was it like over there?
Glenn, first of all, thank you very much. I think all of us who are interested in the world politics and the way different events impact us wherever they're actually happening. And because as news junkies, I have been for the last 30 years, over 30 years. I was moved from Islamabad and Lahore to London back in early 90s to take care of Pakistan's prime news organizations, which is Jang Group, their English language newspaper, The News. And for 6-7 years, I remained a print journalist. But during that, we covered some of the most known European wars, modern wars, uh, for a reason, because those were actually happening in areas where Muslims were one of the parties, fighting parties, and they were found on the receiving end. The first was in Bosnia, which started in 1992, but I tried to cover it. We were stopped. So what we did was, what we could at that time, send materials. We created a convoy of mercy and raised a lot of funds and sport stuff. And they used to drive through from London all the way to Bosnia. But then in 1999, I had a chance to go to actual war zone in Kosovo, and not only covered the war on Kosovo, but traveled through Albania, different towns, because thousands of Kosovo refugees took refuge in Albania, in the bordering areas of Macedonia and Montenegro. So that was a chance to know that, people, what stories we used to hear about those regions. Some of the greatest men in history, people like Alexander, was in Macedonia, a Macedonian, and then he, moved from there, came all the way to India. So we have heard about him. So it was a great learning curve and opportunity to know that although Europe has seen long wars, 30 years war, 100 years war, and two of the most devastating wars, the First World War and the Second World War, that how those people in the Western Europe who now live as one community, as the European Union, right next door to them, people are still ready to kill each other in the name of religion, in the name of ethnicity, in the name of culture, in the name of nation states, etc. Maybe because that was as a journalist, that was the adrenaline which took me to danger zones. I was shot at with machine guns. People ran after us, and my cameraman. We were lucky that the Italian soldiers at that time, who gave us the covering fire. Otherwise, Albanian people who were looting aid convoys and going after journalists, I would have been a story which nobody would have known. A Pakistani, covering a war in Kosovo. But in 2006, when I was heading Geo Television's international operations based in London, another opportunity came up. And because at that time I had dual nationality, the British and Pakistani, I spoke with my line manager and my employer that if they agree, I can go to Israel. And they were, very, very, very quickly, they were ready. Take whatever money you want, and that will be the first choice, because we were trying to tell Pakistan that, listen, we can also operate as an international news channel. And that was the reason why we called it Geo when we launched in 2002, that Geo means world. So wherever something happening, which is a story which we can relate back to our viewers and readers, because those reports which I filed were carried by the newspapers as well. So what actually happened was, because we did not have a cameraman at Geo who could accompany me, so I hired a cameraman who used to work for BBC, and he was an Australian guy, tall, lanky. Otherwise, he shoots underwater filming for BBC live programs, Earth series. Within literally, little planning, but because I've been to a war zone before, we have also covered as Pakistanis on the borders of Afghanistan. That war is still going on for 40 years. And some people would call me a stupid idiot who was living in London, throwing life in danger. But at times, journalists, take those risks to tell stories from the ground, so the people know that how facts are separated from fiction and propaganda. So when I landed in Tel Aviv, first of all, I was interviewed for 8 hours by 7 different interviewers. They were trying to know that what a Pakistani Muslim background journalist, no matter if he's living in London, what the hell is he doing in Israel? On the day, when the other famous terrorist attempt was, uh, you know, basically was being reported on world media, and that was the shoe bomber case. When the gentleman, something Reed, I am forgetting his full name, and London was locked down. Heathrow was locked down. But I somehow managed to take a flight. London, Tel Aviv, sat down easily and threw this question, same questions, but seven different people, and telling me that, Mr. Gauri, this is the ordinary thing, normal thing, what we do to the first timers. And I was, very candidly sitting. You cannot, in a war zone and in a hostile country, you cannot, as a journalist, argue with the authorities. But I told them, I said, listen, this is not something ordinary, because ordinary is my cameraman, who was an Australian, was allowed out literally in 4 minutes. And I said he would be sleeping outside. All the people would have gone home by now. But anyway, after 8 hours, when I came out, we took a cab and drove to Jerusalem, where I had already booked my room in the most known hotel. If you know the history of the area, King David is the most known hotel in Jerusalem. It has history going back to the independence, so-called the creation of the Israel, and how that land was taken away from Palestinians. I stayed there. The gentleman who was staying in the next room is globally known, Wolf Blitzer of CNN. He was staying next door. But what I did was, because I knew that this is the only chance for me to cover a war in Israel, because our other reporter, Hamid Mir, who's a very well-known name in Pakistani media, he was in Lebanon. Because at that time, the war was not between Hamas and Israel. It was between Hezbollah and Israel. Although Hamas was taking chances by throwing homemade missiles from their small towns in Khan Yunis and outskirts of Gaza to all the kibbutz, which are almost more than a dozen kibbutz, which are built on the borders, with Gaza. So what I did was, I hired, as journalists do, I hired a fixer who used to work for CNN, and she took me around from Jerusalem because there was no war in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. To see the war, but it was happening, I had to drive all the way up to Haifa and Nahariya in the northern Israel, on the borders of Lebanon. And there we saw, the action. And the action was that all day long, Hezbollah would throwing in Katyusha missiles. I remember on one particular day, I counted more than 260 missiles which fell, not on the city. Most of the time, because there was no direction. I think they were just firing those missiles from wherever they were in southern Lebanon. But towards the evening of that day, some of the missiles start hitting the city. And that is how we, were. I don't just want to use the word lucky or unlucky, but at least we were successful in filming some of the action, where the missiles fell on residential blocks. People died, people were hurt, and similar shots which you see in war zones. I will not use the word war at that time. What we are seeing now in Gaza is much more horrendous. Israel has an ability to depict small time conflicts between Hezbollah on the north and Gaza in the south to the world as if it is attacked. It is a cyclical thing. Every 2-3 years, it actually happens. If you remember, Hamas and Israelis actually had similar, but smaller scale, but similar, war in 2021. And at that time, I arranged in Pakistan. I think I was the only one who arranged an international webinar on this, and I organized people from Jerusalem and Gaza and West Bank. But coming back to my experience in 2006, I bribed, if I can use the word, Israelis also take bribes, okay, uh, to find my way into Gaza and West Bank, which was I was not allowed. I was allowed to film only, and they made me, come to their press office every day. That whatever I shoot, I have to show it to them first, and they will allow it, whether it will be broadcast or not. They will take the tapes off you. They will check it, whether there is anything material which they will not allow, no matter if even Pakistani channel were to broadcast it, let alone CNN or BBC or Al Jazeera English or whatever. But the chance allowed me to go into Gaza, speak to Gazan, and I realized that at that time that Gaza is one of the two biggest jails on earth. I think in scale, the Indian Kashmir is bigger, than Gaza, but they are also blocked from all sides. Similarly, Gaza is blocked from all sides. You cannot even go fishing. If you go fishing after a mile or two, you will be shot at by the Israeli gunboat soldiers who are permanently anchored there. They will not allow Palestinians to go fishing beyond that point, as if they will run away. Uh, on the Rafah side, where the border basically meets Egypt, that border is also controlled. I had the chance to go into the famous tunnels which the Gazans have dug up, and through there they bring material from Egypt. But the thing is, similarly, I went to West Bank and met the Palestinian Authority people. President Mahmoud Abbas was not there, but I met, the other cabinet ministers. I met famous people you see on, international screens like Hanan Ashrawi or Saib Arakat. Who speak with most of the time. They were the two guys who were speaking on CNN and BBC, talking about West Bank and talking about the solutions, the possible solutions of the issue. If you happen to, be in Israel, you will recognize that what apartheid is. I don't think that there will ever be, and I'm going to make a very bold statement here, there will ever be a solution to what we have been asking, a two-state solution. I don't think. Why? Because just like Pakistan, when Pakistan was created, there was an East Pakistan and West Pakistan, and in between was 1,000 miles of India. Israel will never allow a safe passage between, a safe road passage between West Bank and Gaza. No, they do not even allow their roads, which they have built around West Bank, to be used by Palestinians. They cannot drive on those roads. And every second mile, third mile, you are at checkpoint. So what we see, what I saw was, people, millions of them, permanently in a jail. And at times, if you, in Gaza, what they do is, West Bank gets a lot of money from European Union and from America and from other donor agencies. I did not see that actually happening in Gaza. And if you go to a very small place, which is heavily populated now, over 2 million people live in that small, I will again use in that prison. And they have the heart and the courage to live, in a permanent jail. Because every now and then, even if there is no war, those things are not reported in international media. Whenever Israel wants, they fire missiles, they shoot down, whatever they want to shoot down, from all directions, from Rafah border, from Gaza border, because from three angles, Gaza is, controlled by Israelis. And if you actually want to take anything in, you cannot take a flight out. And level of desperation, I'll tell you a personal example, which I have not, told. I've told my friends, but never spoke on media. I gave a talk at a human rights center in Gaza, and when I finished, I remember there were these three girls, young girls, I think hardly 20, 21, 22. They came up to me and after, doing the basic salam, wa alaikum salam, are you Muslim? I said, I am. And you live in London? I said, yes, I do. Are you married? I said, I am. How many wives do you have? I said, I'm an Indian Pakistani Muslim, so just one wife. Is it possible that you marry all three of us today here? I said, excuse me? And he said, that will be our only chance. It was like, Mr. Gauri, try to understand us. We are desperate to leave this place. Only because you have a British nationality. If you marry us today, you can start the proceedings of pulling us out of this region, and you can abandon us once we are out of this place. We will find. And I said, how will you live, even if you do not make it to London? I said, if we have survived, 20 years in this jail, we will survive anywhere. We have that. And, I have never forgotten their faces. And I thought, listen, this is not possible. And
I think he got disconnected. Can you guys hear him?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear. Yeah, we can hear him.
Yeah,
please go ahead.
Yeah, and I think I met boys, young boys who have lost their limbs, and I remember a young boy. I don't know whether he's alive today or not, because I'm talking about a time which is almost 17 years ago, and he was wearing a football shirt of Barcelona. And I said, he actually asked me, do you play football? I said, no, I watch football. I said, okay. And he said, one day I'll be, a Messi for Gaza. And I said, Messi was just beginning then. I think Messi was not even a name at that time. But I don't know where they watch those football matches. They have small, clubs. And I really don't know whether Messi was big at that time, frankly, because I was not watching football. I was not. And he said, and he named other. No, so sorry, he did not say, pardon me. He said, I actually want to be Ronaldo of Gaza. And I said, I wish you all the luck, But he said, I said, how will you play with one leg? Because his one leg was amputated. And he said, I'm so good that you come and see me in the ground. I can play better with my one leg than they're playing with two legs. And I'm telling you, the stories are so many, heartbreaking stories. If you're actually human, if you have a heart, if you have kids, only then you can relate to those. I salute, their courage, what they're facing. And I don't know how many people have died. We are reporting 10,000, over 10,000. But I will stop here, and if you have any questions,
So one of the questions which comes to mind is that a lot of people say that Israel happens to be an apartheid state, but how much does it extend? You being a British national and Muslim at the same time, did you see a visible difference in terms of how you were treated by the Israeli authorities compared to how other international journalists were treated? And could you see that visible difference in the treatment?
So, Glenn, they treat all journalists, so badly. Whether you're American, British, Muslim, non-Muslim, they do not like journalists who are covering. Any person who has a camera, can be shot at, can be brutalized, can be beaten badly. And beaten badly with what? Young boys and girls who do this compulsory military service, because they know that what they're doing is brutal. So that's why they will actually stop you, whether it is actually happening in Jerusalem, for example, because Jerusalem, many of you would know, many of your viewers might not. It is, very tightly distributed between the Jewish quarter and the Christian quarter and the Muslim quarter. Now, the Christians and the Muslims crisscross between, their territory. Jews don't. So, if, for example, they're taking, I can go on, what I saw in Jerusalem, for example, where what they're doing is they're slowly, street by street, they're taking over what Palestinian was at one time. And they're pushing Palestinians out. So, if you're a journalist and if you're, you might kind of have, press written all over your chest. You might be traveling with, flak jackets underneath. But the moment they see that you have a camera, you're a television, they pounce on you. And so, what this is not, I'm not saying it as a Muslim, I'm just saying it as a journalist. Because
Okay,
once you
nice.
cover a war, when you start reporting facts, you cannot bring in your opinion. Opinion is when you're actually asking me, I can explain my opinion, but when we're
Right.
reporting, when you see, like for example, I can lie, in my words. Camera does not lie. Cameras, because the visual story is always a double story. It is a story which I'm narrating, but my camera is also telling the real story, and that is what Israelis are afraid of. That the cameras
Mm.
show that how brutal they are, how you know I have only read about South Africa. Uh, I remember what my friends who were studying with me when I was studying in, London, what they used to tell me stories about the Bantustan, the ghettos, where the blacks were not allowed. Uh, and in today's world, we have seen so much, and you need to go and see how Israelis. And here, I actually want to again, distinguish very clearly. I know that many of your viewers might not like it. I, as a journalist, very clearly define that there is a million-mile difference between the Jews and the Israelis and the Zionists. You know,
Of course.
because I found people in Israel who are anti-war, anti-Netanyahu, anti-Likud party, and they are very vocal about saying it, that whatever their government is doing, they don't say Israel, but they say that you will find fundamentalists who will say that they have been called to Israel by Lord Himself, as if every Jew walking in Israel is a Moses. It's not. But you will find many people, when I spoke at Jerusalem University, because many of them are educated people, they will take the harshest criticism with a smile, and you will still come across many people who will say that they have directly faced as young kids the stories about Holocaust, but they also believe this might come as shocking to you. Many Jews will say that what Israel is doing to Palestinians reminds us what the stories we have heard from our parents, what the Germans did to them during the Second World War, shortly before that. So it is not just saying anti-Semitism. No, 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 no. Israel, I think, is a state, is employing all those methods which they might have gone through in Europe to the Palestinians. I actually asked in one of my lectures, which I was lucky that they allowed me to speak at Jerusalem University. I said, don't you think that you should have been the people who should deal with Palestinians with some sympathy, some compassion? Because what you tell us, what you have presented us in books and movies and your Holocaust museums, you should have been the last people to employ exactly those tactics. You have created, concentration camps. Gaza is a huge concentration camp where they can go whenever they want, and they can kill as many people and innocent people. Israel today cannot. No media has reported that Israel is killing Hamas. No, Israel is killing innocent Palestinians. Kids, as young children, as young as few weeks old, women, men, old people, men, no, ordinary people who've been bombed out, exterminated completely. And I think if yesterday Hitler was the monster of the world, I think Netanyahu today beats Hitler, hands down.